Clara had always felt like she didn't belong. She grew up in a wealthy family, but despite the money and the fine clothes, she never felt at ease. People would whisper behind her back, and even her father, who should have been her greatest supporter, did little to protect her from the cruel words of others. She was often called too fat by her classmates and the people in town. Every day was a struggle, and no matter what she did, she couldn't escape the shame. Clara tried to ignore the comments, but deep down, they hurt her more than she could say. She had always been a good student, responsible around the house, and even helped with the farm chores, but none of that seemed to matter. To the world, she was just the fat girl, someone who didn't quite measure up. Her father, Mr. Blackwell, was a businessman. He owned several properties, but his wealth didn't bring him happiness. He was always stressed about keeping up with his business dealings, and that left him with little time or concern for Clara. The only thing he cared about was appearances, how others saw him. Clara's weight to him was a problem, not because he cared about her health or happiness, but because it affected his social standing. One day, everything changed. Clara's father made a decision that no one saw coming. He had been in a serious financial situation, his business having taken a huge hit. Desperate to fix it, he looked for any way to get back on top. When an opportunity came up, he took it without thinking of Clara's feelings. A poor rancher named Samuel, who had always worked hard but never had much to show for it, needed help. Mr. Blackwell saw this as a chance to recover his losses. In a desperate bid to make things right, he struck a deal. He offered Clara to the rancher as a kind of punishment. Her father figured that Clara, with her size and weight, could be useful on the ranch, doing chores and working the land. In exchange, Samuel would offer financial support to Mr. Blackwell's struggling business. Clara's father thought this was the best way to solve his problems, but he didn't consider how it would affect Clara. When Clara was told about the arrangement, she was devastated. The idea that her own father would send her away like this tore her apart. He explained that it would be good for her, that she would be helping out on a ranch, and that the work would be good for her. But Clara didn't see it that way. She felt abandoned, as if her father had given up on her. It hurt to know that he saw her as nothing more than a way to fix his financial problems. Despite the pain in her heart, Clara had no choice but to obey. She packed her things in silence, trying not to cry. She didn't even get a chance to say goodbye to her friends. Her father didn't seem to care. He simply told her to make the best of it. The journey to the ranch was long and uncomfortable. Clara sat in the back of the wagon, the dirt road making her feel every bump. Her mind raced as she tried to prepare herself for what lay ahead. She didn't know much about Samuel, the rancher who had agreed to take her in. She had heard whispers about him, that he was poor and had nothing to offer. She feared he would be like everyone else, judging her for her size and making her life even harder. When they finally arrived, Clara's heart sank. The ranch looked nothing like what she had imagined. It wasn't a large, sprawling estate like her father's properties, but a small, modest place on the edge of town. The house was simple, and the barn appeared old and weathered. There was no sign of wealth here, no grand entrances or fancy gardens. It looked like a place where hard work was a daily part of life. Samuel greeted her at the door with a warm smile, though it was clear that life had been hard on him. His face was weathered from years of working outdoors, and his clothes were simple but clean. Clara had expected someone rough and angry, but instead she found a man who seemed calm and collected. "Welcome to the ranch," he said kindly, his voice deep but gentle. Clara didn't know what to say. She felt out of place standing there in front of him, feeling like the world was closing in around her. Samuel showed Clara to her room, which was small but comfortable. There wasn't much, just a bed, a small table, and a few shelves. It wasn't the kind of place she was used to, but it was better than she had expected. She felt a bit of relief, but the truth still weighed on her heart. She was here as a punishment, sent away by her own father. No matter how kind Samuel seemed, she couldn't shake the feeling that her life had been thrown away. Over the next few days, Clara started to settle into the routine of ranch life. She helped Samuel with the animals, cleaned the barn, and even worked in the garden. She had been used to hard work at home, but this was different. There was no one to help her here, no servants or assistants like she had at her father's estate. It was just her and Samuel working side by side. But what Clara didn't know was that Samuel wasn't as poor as he seemed. While the ranch appeared simple, there was something more to it. Samuel had inherited the land from his ancestors, and it was worth more than Clara could have imagined. He didn't flaunt his wealth or his land. He lived modestly, choosing to work the land himself rather than rely on others. He wasn't interested in showing off what he had, and that made him even more mysterious to Clara. In the evenings, after a long day of work, Samuel would sit with Clara and tell her stories about the land, the animals, and the history of the ranch. He never once mentioned the true value of the land. To him, it wasn't about money or status, it was about the work and the life he had chosen. As Clara listened, she began to realize that there was more to Samuel than she had thought. He was kind, thoughtful, and humble. Over time, she started to see him in a new light, not as someone who had taken her in out of pity, but as a man who had his own quiet strength. Despite the rough start, Clara began to feel a sense of purpose on the ranch. She was no longer just the fat girl from town. Here, she was someone who could contribute, someone who could work alongside Samuel and build something meaningful. Little did she know, her father's plan, sending her to the ranch as punishment, was about to take a turn she never expected. Samuel's quiet strength, his hidden wealth, and his kind nature would soon change Clara's life in ways she could never have imagined. As the days passed, Clara's life began to settle into a routine. She woke up early every morning to the sound of birds singing and the soft rustle of wind in the trees. The ranch, though small, had a peaceful feel to it, and the smell of fresh earth and hay filled the air. Samuel was always up before her, already tending to the animals, feeding the horses, and checking on the cattle. He never complained, never rushed, and always worked with a calm that Clara found strange at first but began to admire over time. In the beginning, Clara had trouble adjusting. She wasn't used to this kind of work. At her father's estate, there had always been someone to help her with the chores. Here, it was just her and Samuel working side by side. Samuel never treated her like a servant, though. Instead, he showed her how to care for the animals, how to mend the fences, and how to tend the small garden that grew vegetables and herbs. Clara learned quickly, and with each new task, she felt herself growing stronger, both physically and emotionally. Despite the hard work, Clara found herself feeling a sense of peace that she had never known before. The constant teasing and cruel comments from the past seemed far away. Here, she wasn't just the fat girl from town. She was a person, capable of doing meaningful work. Samuel's quiet encouragement helped her realize that her worth was not tied to her appearance. He never mentioned her weight, never made her feel self-conscious. Instead, he focused on the job at hand, and slowly, Clara began to feel like she was contributing. One afternoon, while they were fixing a fence on the far side of the property, Clara noticed something strange. There was an old weathered gate that led into a part of the ranch she hadn't seen before. It was overgrown with weeds, and the wood was splintered and cracked. It looked like it hadn't been used in years. "What's behind that gate?" Clara asked, curiosity getting the better of her. Samuel paused for a moment, looking at the gate. "That's the back pasture," he said. "I haven't worked that land in a while." Clara was intrigued. There was something mysterious about the way Samuel spoke about it. It was as though there was more to the land than he was letting on. She had noticed that while he was always kind and generous, he never spoke much about his past or his family. She had never asked, but the longer she stayed, the more she wondered. The next day, Samuel told Clara that he had to go into town for a few hours to sell some of the crops. Clara, now comfortable with her duties, stayed behind to take care of the animals and finish some of the smaller tasks around the ranch. As the day passed, Clara found herself walking towards the back pasture again. The gate was still there, standing as if waiting for her to open it. She hesitated for a moment, but her curiosity won out. With a deep breath, Clara pushed the gate open and stepped inside. The land beyond was much more expansive than she had imagined. It was full of tall grass, wildflowers, and thick trees that shaded parts of the land. Clara wandered farther in, exploring the hidden pasture. As she walked, she noticed something even stranger. There were old stone markers scattered throughout the area, some of them half buried in the earth. Clara knelt down beside one of the markers and brushed away the dirt. It was an old family crest etched into the stone. Her heart skipped a beat. She recognized the design. It was the same crest she had seen on old documents her father had once shown her. These markers didn't belong to Samuel. They belonged to a much older family, one with wealth and power. It was then that Clara realized that Samuel's ranch wasn't just a simple piece of land. It was part of a much larger inheritance, one that he had kept hidden from her and everyone else. Her mind raced as she pieced together the information. Samuel wasn't just a poor rancher. He had inherited thousands of acres from his ancestors, land that had been passed down through generations. The ranch was just a small part of a much larger legacy, a legacy Samuel had never spoken about. Clara felt a mix of shock and awe. This was no ordinary ranch, and Samuel was no ordinary man. He had quietly built his life from the ground up, not relying on his wealth, but on his own hard work and determination. When Samuel returned from town, Clara was eager to talk to him. She didn't know how to bring up what she had discovered, but she knew she had to ask. That evening, as they sat together by the fire, Clara finally spoke up. "Samuel, I found something today," she said softly. "The back pasture. It's not just a field, is it?" Samuel looked at her, his expression unreadable. For a moment, Clara thought he might be angry, but instead he nodded slowly. "You found the markers, didn't you?" he said quietly. Clara nodded, her heart racing. "What does it mean? Why didn't you tell me?" Samuel sighed, his eyes distant as if he was lost in thought. "It's part of my family's history," he said. "My ancestors built this land, but I don't care much for the wealth. I've always preferred to live simply. This ranch, the land, it's all I need." Clara sat in silence for a long moment, absorbing his words. She realized then that Samuel wasn't like the other men she had known. He didn't care about showing off his wealth or flaunting his power. He had chosen a life of quiet dignity, working the land and taking pride in what he had built, not for anyone else but for himself. His wealth didn't define him. It was his hard work, his integrity, and his character that truly mattered. Over the next few weeks, Clara's respect for Samuel deepened. She saw how he treated the land with care, how he took pride in every aspect of his work, and how he respected the animals and the earth that provided for him. Clara began to see her own life in a new light. She realized that her father's obsession with appearance and status had never been important. It was the people who worked hard, who cared for others, and who valued the simple things in life that truly mattered. As she spent more time with Samuel, Clara began to change. She grew stronger, not just physically but emotionally. She stopped worrying about her weight, about what others thought of her, and started focusing on the work that lay before her. Samuel had given her something she had never expected, a sense of purpose and belonging. By the time the seasons changed, Clara had become an integral part of the ranch. She had learned more than just the chores of the farm. She had learned the true value of hard work, humility, and respect. And with Samuel by her side, she knew that her life was about to take a new direction, one she could never have imagined when she first arrived at the ranch.